Now listen, we're all on the same page that everybody that watches this channel loves cake. And there's so many different types of cakes. You've got carrot cake, you've got tres leches, you've got almond cake, you've got vanilla sponge. But there's also a cake which I feel like not many people have tasted, but it's a cake that, in my opinion, as much as it pains me to say, it's a cake that's being baked. And it's called the departure cake. It comes from like the southern of Brazil. But let me just break down for you guys the departure cake and why, in my opinion, I feel like this cake is in the process of being baked and hand delivered to Thiago Motta. Now, what are the key ingredients to the departure cake? Number one, losing the fans. And I feel like Thiago Motta, it's now reached the stage of the season. He's lost the fans. Like when you see how quick the Juventus stadium emptied out against Atalanta, the boos, the protests from the Curva Sud, he's lost the fans. So ingredient number one, tick. What's ingredient number two? Ingredient number two is results. And I feel like all of these things are connected. How do you lose the fans? Because of results. Being knocked out by Empoli in that embarrassing fashion, it's not the best of looks. Being knocked out by a PSV team in not the most pleasing of manners, in very embarrassing fashion. So let's just say ingredient number two, results, tick. Now what is ingredient number three? It's the icing on the departure cake. The locker room, the changing room, the squad, the harmony, the morale. And I feel like, in my opinion, has Thiago Motta lost the fans? I feel like he's definitely lost the majority. Now, are results in his favour? Not really, especially when you look at the key competitions that everybody feels like Juventus should be cementing their spot in. Nobody expected Juventus to win the Champions League, but you definitely expected better than an elimination to PSV in that manner. I don't think people looked at the Coppa Italia and cared, but they didn't want to be knocked out by Empoli on penalties against the Empoli B team, a team that's fighting relegation. I need to calm down. You get the point. The third ingredient, the locker room. And I feel like throughout the season, you learn a lot about the players in terms of their character, their personality on the pitch, what they have to say after games, about how they feel in this team under this management. And then you also keep an eye on what Motta has to say in his interviews and his post-match press conferences. And I feel like it's now really reached the stage where ingredient number three is being put on the cake. I personally feel like Motta has lost the changing room. I have. Because there's four key players that I want to mention, and I want to break it down and explain to you guys how these are four integral players to this team, integral players to this project, and how he's lost all four of them along the season. Number one for me is Kenan Yildiz. Now, he is the most exciting young prospects at the club. He is a player that you integrate into your team. He is a player that you look at and tell him, I am going to improve you. I am going to develop you. I am going to make you grow as a professional, as a player, as a human, as an individual. And I don't feel like anybody can turn around and say Kenan Yildiz has benefited as much from working under Thiago Motta. It's now reached the stage of the season where you don't even know if Kenan Yildiz is going to start. And when he does start, you don't even know what position. He's really coming across to me like a utility player. One of your best players, one of your most exciting prospects can't be used as a utility player. The kid is playing on the right-hand side. Now, fair enough, you might turn around and say, he's playing on the right-hand side because Juventus have got a demon on their left-hand side. He's definitely a demon, but not in a good way. Kenan Yildiz is on the right-hand side in order to accommodate a player like Nico Gonzalez, who is now a hindrance. Kenan Yildiz, who can play in the 10, and he's shown in periods this season he excels in that position. He wasn't played in that position in order to accommodate Coop Miners, two players that have started on a consistent basis and failed to deliver the goods. So what message are you sending to this young prospect at the club? I'm not going to play you in your number one favoured position. I'm also not going to play you in your second favoured position. Touching on Kenan, we can touch on Mbangula, a kid that whenever he has been given an opportunity off the bench from the start, he's delivered the goods. But once again, he gets taken out of the picture in order to accommodate summer recruits, the marquee signing. So I look at the relationship between Kenan and Motta For me, it feels broken. For me, it looks like there's a lack of trust. The second player to speak about is the player that's predominantly been the captain, Locatelli. I won't forget the comments after the PSV elimination, because Motta comes out and says, my team played well. And I wouldn't change anything about this performance, about my in-game management, about my instructions. I wouldn't change anything. My team played well. But we all sat down and watched that game. Juventus didn't play well. But then your captain comes out half an hour later and says it was a disappointing performance. We didn't have the mentality. We didn't have the character. We couldn't handle the pressure. Why is the manager and the captain not on the same page? And why is the captain saying the things that a fan wants to hear, but the manager is saying the complete opposite? Now, Locatelli, for me, he's grown under Thiago Motta, but at the same time, I feel like he's grown mainly because the brand of football suits Locatelli. But I also look at that relationship and I say, the fact that you two are not on the same page, it doesn't paint the best of pictures. The third player, and I understand he's a player that's probably got 1.5 foot out of Torino, out of Juventus, it's Dusan Vlahovic. But I look at it like this. And listen, before you guys say, Had, you've got this crazy Dusan Vlahovic bias. No, listen, calm down. I look at it like this. Dusan Vlahovic, it was made crystal clear he's not the man for Thiago Motta, because there was a period where he wasn't scoring goals, he wasn't impacting games, he wasn't really benefiting the team, and everybody was sat saying, take him out of the team, take him out of the picture, put him on the bench. I look at somebody like Kolo Muani, and I feel like the honeymoon period has ended. He came into Juventus. He done so well. Now, this isn't me saying that he's a poor player or he's not worthy of moving to Juventus on a permanent basis, but you could see he is a player that now the pressure is beginning to get to him, because when Juventus lose, everyone's looking at Kolo Muani and saying, why didn't you score? Why didn't you impose yourself? But what message are you sending to the other players in the camp when there's a player that's now struggling to deliver the goods and he's not really having an impact on games, but you've got another player, regardless of how he's performed this season, he's shown in the Juventus shirt, I can score goals, trust me, integrate me. Even if you don't want to take out Kolo Muani, play us together besides just one game against Empoli. Be patient. Play them 2, 3, 4 games, because I'm still a firm believer in they both can play together and they both can benefit one another. But what message do you send to a Dusan Vlahovic, which is your replacement is now struggling just like you were, but I'm going to stick by him and I'm going to bring you on 3-0 down with 10 minutes to go. What were you expecting? Were you expecting for the player to come off the bench hungry, motivated, thinking, I'm Superman, I'm going to score 3, 4 goals and win my team the game with 10 minutes to go? No. And it was no surprise. Dusan Vlahovic came with his head down, unmotivated, unhappy. He sat thinking, why am I coming on 3-0 down when the game is practically done and dusted? That's a relationship that, in my opinion, is broken. The last player, Mr. Consistent. The player that so many people looked at Juventus and said he is the best, one of the best players. He is the player this project should be built around. Cambiaso, he was one player. Win, lose or draw, you were getting a 7 out of 10 out of him. Win, lose or draw, you're getting 5s out of him. He's now, Mr. Consistent has now become Mr. Inconsistent. Why? There was a period of the season where we were like, injuries, he's being forced back. Then there was a period of the season where we were like, it was the rumours to Manchester City. But it's now reached a period of the season where I'm just sat telling myself, maybe it's the players that he's playing with on the left-hand side, they don't complement him. I look at Motta. Maybe it's just the fact that him and Motta don't see eye to eye. And I will never ever forget the moment when Cambiaso had to come on against PSV when there was an injury to Renato Vega. And I saw, it was, I don't know, it all depends on the broadcaster that you were watching, but there was a little moment where it went to the sidelines and you could see Motta and Cambiaso interacting with one another. And Cambiaso was just there like shaking his head, like rolling his eyes. Ever since that little 15-second moment, I was like, there's something going on between those two. Because you could see Cambiaso is being told, warm up, come onto the pitch, but he doesn't look happy. He doesn't look like he wants to listen to his manager. There's a breakdown in communication. And when it comes to managers, I feel like there's a lot of focus on managers when it comes to results. Or there's a lot of focus on managers when it comes to their tactics. Is it the 3 and the 2 and the 5 and then they invert and then the strikers, they drop deep. Listen, there's also another thing we should judge managers on, and it's how they communicate with their players. I call it the feel-good factor. Can they walk in and instill this feel-good factor where players are happy to play? Players are happy to run through a brick wall for a manager. And as much as, in my opinion, tactically, Thiago Motta is a 50-50. At times he's impressed me and at times he's let me down this season. I do also look at the squad and tell myself, how well has Thiago Motta, besides tactics, besides results, besides style of play, how well has he done throughout the season in building a camp, a squad, a locker room that's full of morale, that's full of motivation, that's full of players happy to play for him? And then I sit down and tell myself, a few months ago I said, nepotism is the key. Nepotism is the one disgusting ingredient that can destroy your locker room. And what is nepotism? It's favoritism. When a player is starting week in, week out, not being rotated, not being taken off, and they continue and struggle to perform, but they start every single week. What message are you sending to the players on the bench? What message are you sending to the young players in the reserves that are thinking, oh, maybe now this is my opportunity. Coop Miners is struggling in that position. Maybe, just maybe, the manager might look at me and say, I'm going to give you an opportunity. And I feel like throughout the season, we haven't seen that. I've seen a whole 2-month period where there was nepotism towards Coop Miners. Coop Miners is now being taken out of picture. I'm now seeing 1 month and counting of nepotism towards Nico Gonzalez. Who is next? You're not sending the right message to the squad. You're not even sending the right message to future players that want to come to Juventus, because they're probably sat watching this team and saying, this player is struggling, but he starts week in, week out. So if I was to sign for Juventus under this manager, is he really going to give me an opportunity? Or is he going to stick by the big names, the players that cost a lot of money, the marquee signings that it feels like Juventus are desperate for them to work out? Juventus have spent like, what, 200 million? Let's be real, guys. Juventus are desperate for at least 50% of those summer recruits to work out. And we can probably all sit down and say, in terms of the players that have played, only Di Gregorio and Kefram Turam have really performed. Douglas Luiz, sometimes I even forget he's a Juventus player. Coop Miners hasn't performed. Nico Gonzalez, he hasn't performed. Cabal, he started the season, he done well, then he was completely taken out of the picture, and then the kid came back and he was injured. You're not sending the best of you're not sending the best of messages. And in my opinion, guys, the cake is in the oven. Like I said, the 3 key ingredients, in case you want to bake it one day for an employer that works underneath you, or maybe you want to give it to your manager just so they can leave. The key ingredients are, you lose to fans. That's ingredient number 1. Ingredient number 1 is fans. Ingredient number 2 is results. Ingredient number 3 is the locker room. This is just giving you guys a secret recipe from the chef himself, Haj. If you're new, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to let me know what you think in the comments. And I will catch you guys on another one.